Good afternoon. Shall we start?
Good afternoon.
Yes. Yeah, we can start, right? Last class, we have started to study the flowering physiology, right? And thereafter, we have studied what are the factors which affect the flowering, right? Well, then we can classify the factors into two, internal and external factors. The first we have started with the external factor, right? How the soil and how the climates are influence on the flowering. Right? Under the soil, there are two main factors, water and soil nutrient, right? And under the climate, light, temperature, rainfall, RH and wind, right? And soil factor, we have studied how the soil moisture content affect the flowering, right? If the plant undergoes for a stress, water stress, it definitely affect the flowering, right? The size of the flowers become small and the number of flowers also become low. And nutrient, right? Mainly the carbon-nitrogen ratio determine the flowering. If the carbon-nitrogen ratio is high, right? The plant, it shows the reproductive growth. If the carbon-nitrogen, because nitrogen is the major element which needed for the vegetative growth, right? So when the carbon-nitrogen ratio low, which means the nitrogen content higher than the carbon, right? That plant shows the vegetative growth, right? And thereafter, climatic factors, light, main factor is light. Under the light intensity, quality of light, duration, photo period. These three influence on the flowering. Duration of light, we have studied based on that duration of light that particular plant needed for the flowering. We categorize the plants into three: short day, long day, and day neutral plant. Short day plants that plant flowers when the daylight period less than the critical period, right? That is a plant. Normally, the critical light period is 12 hours. If it is less than that particular plant starts its flowering, right? And the long day plants mean the plant needed the lights higher than the critical period, right? Nearly 15 to 16 hours. Right, most of the exotic vegetables are long day plants, right? And we have studied these things, how the night break influence on the night break means that when we give a flash of light, how it influence on the flowering. And thereafter, day neutral plant, those plants are insensitive to the day length, right? It can produce flowers during the short day as well as in the long day. Whatever it is, it flowers, right? And the intensity of light, this one also, intensity actually under a certain level, when the light intensity increases, the rate of photosynthesis also increases. But thereafter, when the light intensity increases further and further, there are no any changes in the rate of photosynthesis. The rate of photosynthesis becomes constant thereafter, right? And the light quality, right? That they are here that we have studied about the phytochromes. There are two types of phytochromes which are interconvertible, right? P660 or P red, phytochrome 660 nanometer. Other one is the phytochrome 730 or phytochrome far red. Phytochrome 660, it absorbs the red light. That absorption at the wavelength of 660 nanometer. That is the meaning of this P660, right? Also we called as PR. P730, it's absorbed red, far red, right? Within the spectrum, 730 nanometer. Then both are interconvertible, right? When the light is there, the P660 it absorbs this red light and converted to P730. If far red light is there, then it's vice versa. P730, this photogram are red light, and it converted into P, right? So how it influence on the flowering, right? So when that okay. So this actually this flowering depends on PR-PFR ratio, right? Okay, here we can see the absorb the light, right? In short diction, the light is there, right? Which means during the long day period, the far red light absorbed by the P730 and estrogen hormone, right? The temperature also influence that we are going to study how the vernalization influence on the flowering, right? Mainly the plants vegetatively but fail to flower if they are not exposed to a low temperature, right? So that low temperature means the cooling treatment, right? If we give the cooling treatment or the chilling treatment, or if the plant exposed to low temperature, that is vernalization. Vernalization, induction of flowering by lowering the temperature or by cooling treatment or by chilling treatment. So vernalization, as obvious, temperature is influence on that and duration of the vernalization. Right? Okay. Temperature. Flowering is controlled by different temperature. Normally, farmers provide temperature of 2 to 3 degrees Celsius, but optimum temperature may vary actually, -3 to 9 degrees Celsius. Right? But that normally farmers practice is giving 2 to 3 degrees Celsius. Temperature requirement for flowering, it also actually varies with the plant species. Then duration of vernalization, how long we have to give the chilling treatment, right? It may vary from 3 weeks to 3 months, depending on temperature or devernalization. And the sites of vernalization, actually, the normally vernalization, it is done for long day plants, right? Which it means it need long day period or short dark period, right? For induction of flowering. Vernalization treatment can be done in the field or done to seeds before flowering, right? There are two options. We can do it for the do it in the field or do it for seeds. But seeds is a feasible method than the field by giving in the field. Providing vernalization treatment to seed is easier than providing this in the field. Vernalization treatment to seeds. First, how to do the vernalization treatment? Take the seeds and we have to wet it with the water. Then we have to provide the low temperature by giving, by keeping below 4 degrees Celsius, which means it is freezer temperature. Then we have to dry the seeds and thereafter we have to plant in the field. So what is the vernalization mechanism? Scientists found in cool treatment plants, it produces hormone vanillin, it induces the production of florigin, right? What actually happened when the particular seeds which undergoes for the cooling treatment, it produces a hormone, that is vanillin. That particular hormone, that induces the production of florigin. We already know florigin is a hormone which directly responsible for the flowering, right? So vanillin, it induces the production of florigin, right? Production of florigin induces the floral organ development and finally induces the flowering. internal factor. Hormones, right? Hormones we have already studied, external factor and internal factor. I couldn't. Slides are not changing.
Yes.
Okay. Sorry for that. Wait. Now, okay. Can you see the slides?
Okay, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Internal factors, right? Do I need to repeat it again? Because these things we already studied last time, right? We have started with the vernalization, right? And today we are going to study the internal factor. What are the internal main internal factor? Mainly the hormone, plant growth regulators. It affects the flowering, right? Auxin, mainly auxin, gibberellin, cytokinin, ethylene. Auxin, it inhibits the flowering in short day plant and reduce the number of male flowers, right? So what actually happened in the short day plants, auxin inhibit the flowering. Example, cucumber, spelling mistake, C-U-M-B-E-R. Gibberellin, in many short day plants, gibberellin also inhibit the flowering. Cytokinin, it causes flowering in long day plants and in short day condition as well. Cytokinin, it influence on the flowering in a positive way, right? Ethylene, it inhibits the flowering except pineapple, right? Remember, except pineapple. Ethylene, most of the time it inhibits the flowering, but not in the pineapple. There is an exception. In pineapple, application of ethylene causes regular and uniform flowering. So exceptional cases there for the pineapple. In the pineapple, ethylene, it regularize the flowering. And genetic characters of the plant, right? How the genetic character, hormone and genetic character influence on the flowering. The separation of male and female parts can be achieved by genetic separation of the sexes. That means male and female parts are controlled by genetic characters. According to sex expression, two types of flowers and two types of plants are found, right? Then we are going to study what are those monoecious and dioecious plant, right? You may know these terms. Monoecious mean having both male and female flowers on the same plant, right? Both male and female flowers are on the same plant. Example, maize. The dioecious mean male and female parts on separate plants, right? They are male organs are in male flower is in one plant, that is male plant, and female flower is in another plant, right? Example, palmyra, pepper. That is monoecious, dioecious. And here we can classify the flowers into two: bisexual, unisexual. Bisexual means having both male and female in one flower of the same plant. Male organ and female organ is in one flower, right? Of the same plant, right? Example, brinjal, tomato, chili, these are the examples. Unisexual means in same plant, male and female parts are in separate flowers, not in the same flower. But the same plant, male and female parts are in separate flowers. Male flowers also there, female flowers also there. But in the separate flowers. Right? Same plant, but in separate flowers. Remember it, right? Pumpkin, butternut, right? Snake gourd, bitter gourd. These are the examples. Right? Remember? Monoecious means on the same plant, both female and male flowers are there. The dioecious plant, the male and female flowers are in separate plants, not in the same plant. Those are in separate plants. Here, bisexual flower is both male and female flowers are organs are in one flower. Male and female organs are in one flower of the same plant. But unisexual means male and female organs are in separate flowers of the same plant. Right? That means male flower is there, female flowers are there in one same plant. Right? Understand or not? Still confusing?
No, madam.
No, ma'am.
Okay. And we are going to study growth of flower. Right? This is the simple flower diagram. You know it well, right? Here the female floral parts are here and male floral parts are this side, right? This is sepal. This purplish blue color, this is petal, right? And this is peduncle. This is peduncle. This is receptacle, right? And this one, this is ovule. Ovary is there. This is ovary, right? This is style, and this top is stigma, right? Here, the other side, this is filament. Anther is there, right? The pollen grains are there. We can see the pollen grains in the anther, right? This is a typical flower. What type of flower this is? Bisexual or unisexual?
Bisexual.
Bisexual, right? What is unisexual? Yes. Tell me some examples for the unisexual flowers.
Pumpkin.
Pumpkin. What else?
Butternut.
Bitter gourd, snake gourd, butternut.
Right?
Yeah. Example for the unisexual flower.
Brinjal.
Tomato.
Brinjal.
Chili, tomato.
Okay. Then from the childhood, what is the flower you normally take for dissection?
Hibiscus.
Study the floral part.
Hibiscus.
Sunflower.
Yeah, hibiscus. Right? Shoe flower. Okay. This is androzium. Actually, this may be too much, the development of pollen grain. Right? I'm going to just skip it. Here, the androzium, each stamen consists of an anther and filament. This one is anther, this is anther. This is filament. These both are called together as stamen, right? In the anther, we can see there are 4 pollen sacs. Within that, the pollen grains are there, right? This is a simple structure of anther. Filament is there. Anther is there. In the anther, there are 4 pollen sacs. Under that, pollen grains are there. Right? No, I'm not going to teach these things to you. Right? And gynosium means a carpel consists of a stigma, style, and ovary. This is the gynosium one. This is ovary. This is style, and this is the stigma. Right? The pollen grains during pollination, you know it well, right? and the style bears the stigma in a suitable position in the flower to receive the pollen. So normally we know stigma, it receives the pollen. During the pollination, it receives the pollen grains, right? And what is the function of style? It bears the stigma, right? In a suitable position, right? With the intention of receiving pollens to facilitate the pollination, right? So style is for that, right? To bear the stigma in the suitable position to receive the pollen. The ovary is hollow base of the carpel and contains one or more ovules, right? It is a swollen part. You know, this is the swollen part. This is ovary. The ovules are within the ovary, right? Ovules are the structure in which the embryo sac develop after fertilization and become seeds, right? So the pollination thereafter fertilization and it develops into seed, right? Development of ovule also, I'm just going to skip it because this is the slide I have prepared for the last batch, but for your batch, actually, the curriculum has been revised, right? And the new chapters were added to you earlier that plant propagation, it was in the second year as a separate course. But to you, it was incorporated in the first year, one curriculum, right? So I have to just briefly, we have to discuss the flowering physiology as well, right? I'm not going to teach you the development of ovule, right? But you may study it in the A level, right? This one you know it, right? Stigma, style, ovary, the ovules are there. That nucleus, there are two polar nuclei, X cells is there, right? Integuments are there. This polar nuclei and X cell is altogether called as female gametes, right? Okay. Right? So pollination, now you know what is androecium, what is gynoecium, what are the parts are there, right? Now we are going to see how the pollination happens, right? Transfer of pollen to receptive stigma from pollen gauge is referred to as pollination, right? The pollen stigma is there, the receptive stigma, then the pollen it's transferred to the stigma, that is pollination. There are two types of pollination, we all know, cross pollination and self pollination, right? During the pollination, sigma should be in the receptive stage, otherwise pollination will not occur, right? And we are going to see what is self pollination. This already you know it well, right? What is self pollination? This diagram actually illustrates what is self-pollination. What is self-pollination? What is self-pollination?
Pollen is poured into the same flower of the stigma, same flower stigma.
Yes, is he correct? Any others? Are you all there? 125 students are here. Purni, are you there?
Yes, ma'am.
Dilakshika, okay. What is self-pollination?
Depositing pollens from the male part of the flower on the female stigma of the same flower.
Anyone? Concept is correct, but tell it as an definition.
The pollen falls in the flower of the same flower or the another flower in the plant. In the same.
Sorry, I couldn't get you.
The flower of the pollen
Yes.
fall in the same flower or the same flower in the same plant.
Okay. Cross-pollination means? What is cross-pollination? For the cross-pollination, what is the age and what actually it needed? What could be the agent for cross-pollination?
Insects, bees,
Insects,
wind,
wind, yes, right? So what is cross-pollination?
pollen of the flower is deposited into the same species flower, another flower.
Okay, a small exercise, right? Next class I will ask, you have to tell the definition of self-pollination and cross-pollination, right? I will ask randomly. You have to explain me what is cross-pollination, what is self-pollination, because a very simple thing. If you refer it, you never forget it, right? Just I leave it, but you know what is pollination, right? Fertilization. After pollination, the fertilization has to be automatically done, right? Once the pollination has occurred, the pollen tube grows down towards the style into ovary, right? Once the pollination completed, the pollen starts to grow it as pollen. The pollen tube starts to develop from that. It goes down, it grows down in the style and towards the ovary, right? Then it reaches the embryo sac within the ovule, right? And in the ovary there are ovules, right? And it reaches the embryo sac within the ovule. Two male gametes from the pollen tube are inserted into the embryo sac. Right? Two male gametes from the pollen tube are inserted into the embryo sac, one of which unites with the female gamete called as fertilization. Right? So what is happening? After pollination, the pollen tubes develop from the pollen. It grows down through the style into ovary. In the ovary, ovules are there. Right? So that the pollen tube reaches the embryo sac of the ovule, right? There are two male gametes from the pollen tube which are inserted into the embryo sac, right? One of the female gamete unite with the female gamete. That is called as fertilization. Fertilization means fusion of male and female gametes together. To produce a zygote which divided to become the embryo, right? From that, zygote is soon after fertilization, zygote is developed, right? And which divided to become embryo. Thereafter, from the zygote, automatically embryo developed. The other gamete unites with the polar nuclei to produce the endosperm, right? One is fused with the female gamete, it produced the zygote, thereafter it divided rapidly to become the embryo. The other male gamete, it unite with the two polar nuclei to produce the endosperm. Right? Okay, the ovary gives rise to the fruit, which may be defined as the structure which results from the development of tissues, which supports the ovule of the plant, and ovule leads to the seeds. Right? So from that, fruit starts to develop, right? Which may be defined as the structure. Fruit is defined as a structure which results from the development of tissue which support the ovules of the plant, and ovule leads to the seeds, right? Here, female, egg means the female gamete fused with male gamete, develop zygote, right? Thereafter it develop again into embryo. The polar nucleus cell, right? Polar nuclei, it fused with the other male gamete. Right, the two female male gametes are developed from the pollen tube. One of the male gamete it is fused with the female gamete to produce zygote. The other male gamete it fused with the polar nuclei to develop as an endosperm. Right, the intergument it developed as a seed cord. Right, here you can see the pollen tube is there. Right. Generative nucleus, tube nucleus, right? So it goes through this one, and it grows through into the ovule, right? And it polar nuclei is there, egg cells are there, and both gametes fused with each other, right? From that zygote and endosperm develop. Zygote, it ultimately developed into embryo, and the endosperm also developed from that, right? Okay. That is pollination and fertilization, and thereafter physiology of fruit set we have to study. Fruit set may be defined as the rapid growth of the ovary, which usually follows pollination and fertilization. Right? The fruit set may be defined as the rapid growth of ovary, right? After pollination and fertilization. Both pollination and fertilization must normally take place to produce viable seed. However, there are cases where development of fruits occurs without pollination and fertilization, resulting seedlessness. Right? Normally, to produce the seeds, viable seeds, pollination and fertilization is essential. But in some cases, right, the fruits are developed without pollination and fertilization. So there are no any seeds, right? That is seedlessness. That phenomena we call parthenocarpy, right? Most of the time, normally from the pollination fertilization, the fruits are developed and we can find the viable seeds within that. But in some cases, there are some special cases where the fruit development takes place without pollination and fertilization, which result seedlessness. That is called as parthenocarpy. There are again two types of parthenocarpy. One is vegetative parthenocarpy. Second one is stimulative parthenocarpy. Vegetative parthenocarpy means development of fruits without pollination. Example, pineapple and banana. There are no any pollination. So the fruits are developed without pollination. Stimulative parthenocarpy means requires the stimulus of pollen without subsequent fertilization. Pollination may be there, right? But there are no any fertilization, right? To set the fruit, the pollen act as a stimuli, right, for the fruit development. But the pollen will not fertilize. Pollen tube will not develop, and there will be no any fertilization process, right, to set the flower, fruit. Understand? Vegetative cropping means there are no any pollination. For the pollens are not required as a stimuli for the fruit development, right? Without pollination development take place. But the stimulative parthenocarpy, that stimulative means there should be a stimuli for the fruit set. That is pollen here. Understand? So here there are no any fertilization. Understand? Vegetative, no pollination, no fertilization. Stimulative parthenocarpy, pollen stimulus is required, but not the fertilization. Example, apple. Right? Right? Then we are going to study what are the genetic factors influence on the fruit set, right? One is stigmatic effect, other one is the pollen effect, right? Another genetic factor, stigmatic effect. Stigmatic effect is there, pollen effect also there. Stigmatic effect means during pollination, stigma should be receptive in condition to attract the pollen. That is obvious, right? Receptive condition may vary with the plant species to species. Example, passion, the stigma is receptive for very shorter period. Mango says 2 hours is the receptive period. Tomato 1 way, it's a long time, right? Coconut 2 to 3 days. So receptivity vary with the plant species to species. But for the pollination, pollen receptivity is important. Right? Sorry, not stigma receptivity is important. That is stigmatic effect. Right? Pollen effect means some pollens are sterile, so that pollen do not help in fruit set. Pollens are there, but those are in the sterile condition, not in the fertile condition. Pollens have toxic substance which are toxic to stigma, which leads to no fertilization. Right? Pollens which may be toxic because of this toxic effect. The stigma will not receive that one, receive the pollen, so fertilization will not happen. That's therefore no any fruit set. Some pollen has inability to produce pollen tube. Right? The pollination may take place, but if the pollen will not produce pollen tube. So there are no chances for the fertilization. That case also there. In this case, there is no any fertilization, so fruit set does not occur. Right? The pollen effect, there are several conditions. Right? Sometimes the pollens are sterile, sometimes pollens are toxic. So because of the toxicity, fertilization will not occur. So no any fruit set. Some pollen, those will not produce pollen tube. So no fertilization, no fruit set. That case also there. So these are the genetic factors, right? Stigmatic effect also influence on the fruit set, right? Because the stigma should be receptive, right? Otherwise, no any fruit set, right? No any pollination, no fertilization. Pollen effect also there, right? For the successful pollination and fertilization, condition of pollen is important, right? Environmental factor, right? Soil factor, mainly the nutrition and water. We have already seen this one for the flowering. But the same factor influence on the fruit set as well, right? Fruit nutrition, fruit set can be included by application of fertilizers about 1 month before flowering. Right? We have to apply fertilizers, right? Water, inadequate water supply, drought leads to flower and fruit drop, right? If the continuous water source is there, we know that flower size reduce and the flower starts to drop. As well as if there are any fruits, those fruits maybe become very small in size compared to the normal one, and due to the high water stress, it may start to drop down, right? So adequate amount of water reduce the flower and fruit drop. So we have to adequately water. The second one, climatic, under that external factor, soil factor and climatic factor. Climatic factor, temperature, rainfall, right? Temperature and rainfall. High temperature and very low temperature affect the fruit set because of the effect of pollination, right? As we discussed earlier, the cross-pollination, there should be an agent, right? Most of the time, insects, right? Bees or the other insects are the carriers of pollen, right? So cross-pollination is facilitated by the insects. High temperature reduces the insects population, so that leads to reduce the cross-pollination, right? And the second one, the sterility of pollen or the stigma will be dry because of the temperature, right? Pollen also become dry. Both receptivity of stigma reduce due to the high temperature, right? It starts to dry, as well as the pollen dry. Pollen also starts to dry. Desiccation may occur due to high temperature, right? So these are bigger, the low temperature as well as high temperature, very low, which means very high temperature and very low temperature both affects the fruit set through pollination, right? Rainfall, high rainfall removes pollen from flower. We know that if it is high rainfall, that all the pollens wash off, right? And another condition, bursting of pollen because of absorption of high amount of water, right? It starts to absorb more water and bursting may happen. Insect population also affected by high rainfall, so that it automatically influences on the cross-pollination. If insect population low due to rainfall, that affects the cross-pollination, right? So here we have studied what are the, sorry. Is this visible now?
Yes.
Okay. And we have studied under the external factor, soil and climate, soil factor, nutrient and water, external factor, climatic factor, temperature and rainfall we have studied. And the third factor is wind, right? Wind, and the fourth one is RH. Wind, optimal level of wind velocity increases the fruit set, right? In cross-pollinated flowers, high velocity of wind reduces the fruit set because of dropping of flowers, desiccation of flowers, and reduction in insect population, right? So optimum wind velocity is essential for the fruit set, right? If there are high velocity of wind, right, fruit drop happens. The flowers, because of low humidity, desiccation of flowers is common, and the insect population also reduce. If it is less insect population, it affects the cross-pollination, right? This may happen due to high wind, right? Relative humidity, high RH reduce the fruit set. right? If high RH, absorption of moisture by the pollens, which leads to bursting, right? And if RH is high, it automatically influence the disease conditions, right? So increased disease condition also affects the fruit set, bursting of flower, higher disease incidence due to RH, it affects the fruit set, right? So fruit set we have studied, right? Today we have started with that vernalization, but vernalization last class also we have studied what is vernalization, right? Then we have continued with that, and thereafter we have mainly studied that. The last class we have started to study the external factors we have completed today. Then we have started internal factors which affects the effect on flowering. One is hormone, other one is genetic condition. Hormone, the cytokinin positively influence on the flowering, but other hormones, auxin, gibberellin, ethylene, right? It negatively influence or inhibits the flowering. But for the ethylene, there is an exception, right? In the pineapple. And the genetic character of the plant also influence. We have studied sex expression, how it influence, right? There are two types of flowers and two types of plants are found according to the sex expression. We have studied according two types of plants, monoecious, dioecious, and two types of flowers, bisexual, unisexual, right? And we have seen typical flower diagram and the floral parts we have studied. And what is androecium, what is gynoecium? The gynoecium we already studied. And then we have started with the pollination, right? What is pollination, right? There is a portion for your reference, what is cross-pollination and what is self-pollination, and how the fertilization happens, how the pollen tube develop, and how it reach the ovary and into ovule, right? The embryo sac is there, right? How the fusion of male gamete with the female gamete happen. There are two male gametes, right? The one gamete, it fused with the female gamete to produce zygote and it developed into embryo. The other male gamete, it fused with the polar nuclei, it produced endosperm, right? And then the fruit development starts, and fruit development means the fruit set happens, right? That we have started with the physiology of fruit set today, and we have completed that one, right? What is fruit set, right? For the fruit set, what are the two phenomena are essential? Pollination and fertilization. But without the pollination and fertilization also, there are possibilities for the fruit set. But in that fruit set, in the fruit development, there are no any seeds. That is seedlessness, right? Two types are there. In one case, normally the pollination fertilization happens and the seed development is there. Those fruits also there. In other case, without development of seeds, right? Due to the absence of pollination, fertilization, the fruits are developed without seed. That is seedlessness. We also called as parthenocarpy. There are two types of parthenocarpy, vegetative and stimulative parthenocarpy. And what are the factors influence on the fruit set, right? Genetic factor and climatic factor. Genetic factor, one is stigmatic condition, and the pollen condition. Environmental factor, soil factor, climatic factor. Soil factor, soil nutrient, soil moisture content. Climatic factor, temperature, wind, RH, rainfall, right? That's all, right? We can stop here and we will continue on Thursday, right? Thursday 9 to 10. Okay? Any doubts?